an election and facing so many things, Father, that may you just guide us in your light. May you just lead us to where we need to go. Give us the words to say, the words to the direction to go, Father. And I just thank you for Todd and all that he's doing. May you put a hedge of protection around him and keep him safe in all that he's doing, Father, to bring so much truth to the people, so much information that without him, we wouldn't have it, Father. And so I just thank you for this time that you've given us. May you guide us through all of this and bless this time and bless every moment that you give us in your precious name, Jesus. Amen. So thank you, Todd, for being here. I'm sorry, my dog is making some noises. But why don't you tell me about, because, we know there's a caravan coming forward right now. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. To understand the caravan situation, you have to go back about a year, almost to around Christmas 2023. If you remember, the largest numbers that we'd ever seen coming over the border were just pouring in a torrent that month and the month before, 10, 12, 14,000 every single day. It was unbelievable. And it was driving the polls down for the Democrats that were just beginning the campaign season. Biden was running at that time, and they had to put the kibosh on that. They could not have that happening during the campaign. No way. It was driving the polls down. So they went to Mexico and cut a very mysterious deal for Mexico to deploy its military all along the U.S.-Mexico border and start scooping up tens of thousands of immigrants and putting them on buses and planes and shipping them all the way down to the southern provinces and then trapping them there behind a military blockade so that it would drop the numbers and the congestion at our border, and the candidates could say, what crisis? There's nobody coming across.
Yeah,
that's exactly what happened. That's what they did. The deal held that the Mexicans would do this probably through the campaign. We don't really know exactly, but that campaign is almost over, obviously. And so I went to Tapachula last week. I was down there for about a week. That's the southernmost city inside the blockade zone. And there I found what appeared to be, to me, hundreds of thousands of immigrants trapped, struggling to get to the U.S. border before Trump might win. Their feeling is that if Trump wins, he's going to sew that thing up and they'll never get in. So they feel like, so there's a lot of tension between the Mexican military blockade and government and all these immigrants who are like, oh my God, Trump's going to win. They call him El Diablo, actually.
Really?
Yeah, really. So the caravans, one thing I need to explain about the caravans is that so many people are pouring into Mexico and getting trapped behind that blockade. About 7,000 a day now from Guatemala to beat the Trump win, that it is really creating a lot of political local problems for the Mexicans. So they started issuing travel permits, thousands of them, to people in Tapachula, not to go beyond to the northern border, but to just go to other cities down there that were less packed. They were the empty sardine cans elsewhere in the area. But it obviously isn't moving them fast enough. So the Mexican government appears to have authorized the caravans to go to these other cities, not to the U.S. border.
Right.
To go only to these other cities for at least for the next couple of weeks. So the caravans that you're seeing are not coming to the U.S. border by my estimation. I spent a full day with one of the caravans and interviewed people all day long in the caravans. And their understanding is that they were just going to this one other city and they were being escorted by the Mexican military. So it was just a way, the caravans right now are just a way to ease the pressure on the southern cities and distribute that angry population elsewhere around that area, at least till November 5th. But my feeling is that after November 5th, the Mexicans should feel we did the part. We met our obligation and we're going to clear the lines here. We're clearing the pipes. And so I kind of fear, and I really hope I'm wrong, that after sometime in the weeks after November 5th, we're going to see a massive rush on our southern borders. Those caravans will form up. They will bring people to the U.S. border, but not just yet. It's
Right.
like the Mexicans have to hold their breath underwater that last 10 seconds.
Right.
They can't have, like, in the week before, the vote, thousands of people pouring across.
Right.
That cannot be allowed to happen. By Mexico doesn't want Trump to win either.
Right.
They want Harris to win, obviously. So they don't want to do anything that'll help Trump. And that would definitely help Trump if 10,000 a day started pouring across in the final days before the election.
Because it would prove that he's right, correct? I mean, because right
Yeah.
now they're trying to act like, oh, there's nothing going on. And if all of a sudden you don't have all these people, they're going to be going, oh, whoops. Okay, so the border isn't secure. Wait a minute. Right? Is that where you're headed?
Exactly. That's exactly my theory. The whole thing is, I mean, that's what I think is going on down there. One thing I would mention about this is, the Mexican military operation down there is called Operation Carousel. Because you go north, we move you south. You go
Right.
north, we move you south.
Right.
So they call it like kind of the Operation Carousel. But it was required by the Biden-Harris administration. And it shows you that they can shut down a lot of that traffic with one fell swoop. They don't need the Langford Senate bill that they keep
Right.
talking about. If only we had the Langford Senate bill, we could. No, they dropped those numbers way down just doing that. And by the way, that's what Trump was doing when he was in office. They literally tore a page from the Trump playbook with that Mexican operation. The main difference being that under the Biden-Harris administration, it's temporary. Nobody expects it to last. If Trump comes in, it's going to be like full hardcore stop for 4 straight years.
Right.
That's a different ball game.
Right. And so when you're talking to these people, I mean, do they understand what's going on? Or are they kind of telling you that their plan is to listen to what they're being told right now, and then they're going to make the trek up later?
Yeah, most everyone that I talked to was unaware of the diplomatic deal. All they knew is that the Mexicans are mean.
Mm.
Mexicans are stopping us. They won't let us go beyond Mexico City. If they catch us north of Mexico City, we're going to get sent all the way back to the hellscape
Right.
of Tapachula and all this territory down there. They hate it down there. And so it's a really quite a potent deterrent.
Right.
Put it that way. Nobody wants to end up stuck in Tapachula. Any move forward at all to anywhere other than Tapachula is a positive thing for them.
Right. I mean, because I do find too, when I'm encountering people that come across from Mexico, they'll be thinking like, are we in the United States? Like, where are we still in Mexico? They're kind of freaked out. They don't realize I'm like, you crossed over a wall. I mean, but I guess you kind of crossed where there wasn't one. So it could be a little bit, unknown, but they definitely don't want to be in Mexico, which is interesting to me. Because are they processing them at all? I mean, because they're giving them the travel permit, right? And I've seen those, but are they going through Mexican immigration at all that you found anybody in this caravan?
No, because I mean, it used to be that the Mexicans would have this pretense of trying to block them and slow them down by making them apply for Mexican residency and asylum visas. But after the December deal was struck, the Mexicans stopped granting asylum cards completely.
Okay.
So once they stopped doing that, and the numbers you can see just plummet right after December. I mean, go down to almost zero. And because nobody's getting those cards anymore, they're not even bothering to apply. So the number of applications followed the number of grants straight down. So that's not really happening right now. But what they are giving them are short travel permits for just from intercity travel. You can go from Tapachula to Huixla, or Tapachula to Tuxtla, or one of these other southern cities down there, and they actually bring up the buses. Mexican immigration is calling out their names, and they come out of the crowd and go and board the bus, and then they fill the bus up and they go to this town, and they let them out there, and that's their only permission is to be as far north as that town.
Wow.
They go beyond that town and get caught, they could very well end up back in the horrid Tapachula, which is
Right.
everybody's nightmare.
So are there NGOs that are also helping them down there at that, or in those points? I mean, are they getting hotels? Like, what is that like? I mean, are they just supposed to kind of stay there until they're told they can leave?
So I just posted yesterday a story about the NGOs and the UN yesterday afternoon in the Daily Wire.
Okay.
You go to the Daily Wire and look up my name, or you can probably find it and post it. I've got it on
Yes.
Twitter or X,
Okay.
on my account on X. The United Nations down there is building this massive illegal immigration mall down there. 75,000 square feet. UNHCR is building this thing with the Mexicans on Mexican land in Tapachula. I put my drone up over this thing. You wouldn't believe how huge it is. And it shows that the UN and those NGOs at this point anyway are betting on a Harris win
Right.
when they are putting that kind of money and time and effort into a huge one-stop, will help everybody shopping mall, wherever all the NGOs and UN agencies are under one roof, and they've got a big space out there for a tent city, and it's clear what they have in mind. But also, I was down in August. I was in Colombia and Panama, and they had NGO villages down there set up, like kind of these big swap meets with storefronts of all the different NGOs all the way around, and the immigrants come into the little towns, and there's permanent billboards up saying, "Go here. Here's where you can find all the stuff you need to keep going."
Wow.
And so my piece in the Daily Wire explains all that, and I quoted some of the NGO workers and interviewed them, and I put in all of what I've seen there. It's elaborate. The NGOs, there are hundreds of them down there. U.S. NGOs, international NGOs of all kinds from Europe, and NGOs that are indigenous to Latin America. But they all are receiving U.S. taxpayer money by the hundreds of millions of dollars flowing through down there to build this safety net, a very incentivizing safety net from South America all the way to the U.S. border. And yes, Tapachula is a key strategic city for this, but so are all of the little shanty NGO towns that I found all the way in Colombia and in Panama too. And they really are entrenching for a long-term future of high volume mass migration.
Right, which is interesting to think about, because they wouldn't waste that money if they knew or had any kind of inkling that they weren't going to win and this wasn't going to continue, right? I mean, are you seeing newer NGOs, like ones that are kind of coming out from the woodwork, like you haven't seen before, or are they usually all the same suspects?
I mean, a lot of the ones, there's a lot of local ones, like there are some that are just Colombian ones that are affiliated. A lot of them are affiliated with the Catholic diocese.
Right.
Of Colombia and Panama and whichever country. There's Caritas's down there. There's all the usual suspects. There's Doctors Without Borders. There's international NGOs that are set up down there that are in collaboration with the UNHCR and the IOM, which is the other huge UN agency. Those agencies are the ones that are kind of the Papa Bear, Mama Bear agencies that are building this infrastructure, this trail support safety net all the way through, and they're using really hundreds of millions of dollars in U.S. taxpayer money that is passed through the UN agencies to the NGOs who dole it out to the NGOs, from the U.S. State Department, USAID, and other appropriations that come from the White House and Congress, et cetera, for the UN, to the tune of $1.9 billion just in 2024,
Wow.
$2.2 billion last year. I mean, $4 or $5 billion just in the last couple of years. In 2019, just to give you a comparison, it was 377 million bucks,
Oh, wow.
which is kind of like a pretty big increase, right?
Right.
It shows you what they're doing down there, and they have a lot of money to build this infrastructure. It seems to me that they're betting on a Harris victory.
Right. And that's what's kind of scary to think about. Because I was thinking that they would continue to have them coming right now. And then when what you're saying, it's like, yeah, of course it's going to look bad. It would actually prove that Trump is right. If Trump does get in, what do you think is going to happen? I mean, do you think that this will all stop? I mean,
I think that it'll stop within an hour of his inauguration. It's going to stop immediately because all he has to do is remain in Mexico that first hour, reissue orders to Border Patrol for pushbacks under remain in Mexico. And then to supplement the remain in Mexico, he just has to invoke Section 212F. Go look it up, Google 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act, which allows the president to do carte blanche pushbacks of 100% of everybody that crosses that border whenever he wants, and deny them the ability to claim asylum.
right.
Under those two, the numbers are going to decline to like just about, maybe a few thousand gotaways or something.
Right.
There's so many people trying it. Nobody's going to want to come anymore. They're going to want to stay home. The immigrants know this. There may not be a lot of sophistication about the diplomacy. The deals that were struck back in December did not get much airplay or media attention in the U.S., but they definitely are paying very, very close attention to every single word that comes out of Donald Trump's mouth and every single word that comes out of Harris's mouth too. And there's no immigrant that I interviewed that I didn't ask, hey, are you paying attention to the election? What do you think? And man, they are. And they think they have a lot of good analytical thinking going on about it too, because their lives literally depend on, how the trajectory of their lives depend on the outcome of this. They know that they're not getting in under Trump if he's in office. And they also believe that there'll be a much higher chance that they'll be deported because he keeps talking about we're going to deport everybody.
Right.
So,
but do they then believe like that do they think he's going to win? Because why would they still kind of, you know what I mean? What would their thinking be to come if they think that halfway through they're going to be sent back? Or
they're just normal people. I mean, they know there's a 50-50 chance. I mean, the polls are showing the polls get published in Spanish language and all around the world. Every language in the world translates his speeches, and I mean, it's all out there.
Wow.
And also the polls. So they know there's a 50-50 chance. It's literally a coin toss, and that is a really high, unacceptable percentage odds for them.
Right.
50% chance that you're going to get in or not. That you spent $15,000 or $10,000 to get this far, and if you can't get the Mexicans to let you go in the final stretch, then all that is a loss.
Right.
All that is a loss. It's a terrible financial hit. It's a catastrophic financial hit on a lot of those families, the amount of money that they spent to get that far.
Right.
And that's really what they mostly think about. If I'm being honest, they're just thinking about the money that they spent. It always comes down to the money they spent. Oh my God, I borrowed all this money and I'm going to not get it. I'm going to lose the money. I have to go home.
Do you find that a lot of them are borrowing it? Because I found there's a lot that even have money and they don't even, I mean, they'll go stay in a shelter in New York having tens of thousands, if not, who knows how much money, that there's like endless amounts of money they have.
Like anything else, the immigrant population is stratified economically. And so there are a lot of immigrants that are wealthy.
Hmm.
And by the way, the 50 we're still getting 50 to 60,000 hitting our border every
Right.
month. That's significant. That's a huge number. But if you take a good hard look at those ones that are coming in, they are the wealthy.
Hmm.
Those are the moneyed class. And what they're doing is they are paying human smugglers huge amounts of money to pay off the Mexicans all the way through to get in.
Right.
They are paying, money is no object uh, to most of those people that you're seeing cross the border right now. But the middle class and the lower classes um, usually will spend either everything that they owned, plus they had to borrow, just to
Hmm.
sustain themselves to get as far as Mexico. Never mind that they can't really afford yet the final smuggling fees to get over the border. A lot of them have to pay like a toll to get, a couple grand to even cross the Rio Grande, or to even get up there, they have to pay somebody. And so the poorest of the poor are the ones that you meet in Tapachula, that
Hmm.
are just on the streets, and they have no money at all. So it's stratified. The Chinese all are fabulously wealthy. They
Yes.
never have to ask anything from any. Even the NGOs down there say, yeah, the Chinese never ask us for anything. They have huge wads of greenbacks, and they just are spreading that cash, and so are a lot of other different nationalities. A lot of the Venezuelans are very wealthy, and you see the Venezuelans are very well equipped, and
Hmm.
a lot of the women are still like fully nail polished and earrings.
Right.
It's weird to see them
Yeah.
out in the jungle with like a backpack, and they get these smugglers to carry their backpacks for them and stuff. They got to pay extra.
For
Um,
them to carry it, that's
yeah,
interesting.
there's all that. I mean, it's economically stratified. So
Right.
some of them borrow the money from friends. A lot of them have relatives in the U.S. that lend them the money at interest for the smuggling, and then they'll have to pay it back when they start working inside the U.S.
Have you talked to people? Because I mean, I know people will get, there's women and even children, or even, men and boys will be raped along the way, as because part of that, if they can't pay, that is something that tends to happen. Do you come across that when you talk to people? I don't know if they'd be necessarily wanting to be upfront about that, but have you ever
I
spoke
mean,
to someone?
yeah, I mean, there's rapes that go on all the time out there.
Mhm.
It's it's definitely, one thing that I learned from the NGOs is, the NGOs out there provide, the ones that I met in Colombia.
Yeah.
They provide classes 3 times a week for the children in their native language about how to avoid the predators
Wow.
that are with them on the trail. These aren't even like bandits that are coming in out of the brush. These are like the other immigrants,
Right.
adult immigrants that are sexually abusing the children as they all pass together. So they have 3 times a week they're doing that, and the IOM and some of these other ones pass out kits
Yeah.
to prevent rape, and you can see condoms for sale at all the right next to the backpacks and the camping stoves. Um,
I've been finding those a lot here in California. Like when they come across, they're unopened, but they all are the same brand. And I just started seeing a lot of those. And then I know because it's like a rape kit almost, where you got wipes and a condom, a morning after pill. I found one of the bags that they give, but I just thought it was interesting to see so many condoms discarded. Like it's where they discard their RDs and stuff. I don't know. If they were buying those along the way. It was very interesting to find that. It was a little disturbing to me. But
yeah, a little disturbing.
I mean, quite disturbing. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
like,
but
I mean,
I mean, uh, a lot of the kind of open borders types will look at that and say, look, we've got to let them in now after all they've been through. But to a certain extent, the immigrants are responsible for putting themselves in this kind of risk. I mean, if I'm going down to cover this story and I'm going into dangerous places and something happens to me, And there have been times where I've come close to something happening to me. There's nobody that I can blame except me for taking on the risk. Uh,
Right.
I'm sorry, but don't bring your kids into that.
Right.
And you don't tell me that that you're fleeing death, because you're a liar. You're
Right.
not fleeing death. Hardly any of them are fleeing death. They're
Exactly.
coming for the same reason that I go down and take risks to cover them. It's because you're kind of grasping to achieve a certain thing,
Hmm.
not because you're fleeing from something. And the narrative about that is, well, my God, they're so desperate to flee that they subject themselves to rape. That's not true.
Mm-mm.
That is a lie. I find that to be a broad lie, that they are fleeing horrible things in their home countries. When Donald Trump was in office and was doing Remain in Mexico in 2019 and actually pushing them back under Remain in Mexico, I went into Mexico and among them and interviewed them for days on end. And my question was always, well, what are you going to do now? Now that you have to claim asylum in Mexico instead of inside the U.S. And they're like, oh, I'm going home. I'm like, wait a minute. What do you mean you're going home? I thought you were about to apply for asylum on grounds that you absolutely could never return home again.
Right.
Like, what? No, we don't know anything about that. We're just going home. I'm going to go get a job. Nobody, all of them told me they're going home. And in fact, the IOM, the International Organization for Migration, it's a UN agency, in those days was providing free bus passage to thousands of Trump's pushbacks to go all the way back to their Honduras and El Salvador and wherever they came from, to help them free bus fare home. It couldn't be that bad if the
Right.
United Nations is able to fill whole buses to return them back to these on fire hellhole, hellscape places that they had to flee for their lives from. That whole thing is just BS.
Yes.
So they're subjecting themselves to these terrors and these dangers voluntarily, just like I, as a war correspondent or something else, am subjecting myself to death and terrible things if I go cover a war for my
Right.
career.
Right. It's interesting. So, are you encountering a lot of unaccompanied minors in this caravan? That's
No, all the miners that I met down there were accompanied.
okay.
Now, were they with their parents? I don't know.
Right.
I did see a lot of minors out there with adults. I'll just put it that way. And I assume that they're with their parents. I did meet an Iranian, and I interviewed him. I put his interview up on my YouTube account. And he was traveling with two underage guys, teenagers. And I was like, well, who are these guys? Are they your sons? And he said, well, they're the children of my cousin's cousins. So I mean, you don't know. I mean, he was just an adult friend of the family kind of thing, or distant relative who was escorting them in. And
Right.
I don't think that they were being abused or something. I'm just saying that who knows.
Right. And that's the disturbing part, is like you don't really know. And that's why I'd wonder, like, if they're taking this trek, is that really your child? Because would you do that if it was your child? Would you be more likely to do it if it's not, because you don't really care and you're just going to get a payment? It's interesting.
Well, I mean, let me put it this way. When that was happening, there was a brief period when Trump was in office when family units figured out that if they got in, the Americans, there was a legal thing that forced them to release families.
Right.
The whole world found out about it. It had been around for a while, but nobody knew about it. And they found out about it through the press. And it sparked off this big wave of family units. And it turned out that a bunch of them were bringing in kids that weren't theirs because it was a free ticket in. Yeah, this is my kid. So the Trump administration put in rapid DNA tests that could be done at the border in 45 minutes with a cheek swab. And they would line them all up. Okay, all the family groups get in line for your cheek swab. and they would break right there in line and say, "Not my kid. Sorry, you got it. I'm just going to tell you right now, that's not my kid." And the whole story would come out. They would break right there in line. And so the problem ended because word spread of that all over the place. And as soon as Biden came in, they canceled that program right off the bat with no explanation. A 2-line memo. I have it. And I think of all the policy choices that I personally have seen and logged in the last 3.5 years, there is none more egregious and evil than that one right there, where they eliminated rapid DNA testing for the sake of expediency so they could move. 45 minutes was too long. They were building up too many families. Just let them in. We'll sort it out later after they're raped or whatever, sold into labor markets or whatever, or beaten up or abandoned in a cornfield or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and then I think about the 325,000 children that they lost, and it's like, what about that? I mean, what do you think about that? And I know you have to go, so I don't want to keep you too much longer, but
I mean, first of all, I think it's 430,000 or something. I don't know where 325. I read the report and they're talking about 400 and something thousand that they lost track of. And, we don't, they were in such a rush to move. First of all, they're the ones that said, we will turn no family unit back. Mm-hmm. We will turn no unaccompanied minor back. When they said that out loud, and I mean the president of the United States and then Mayorkas and all of them said this out loud on TV repeatedly. They caused this problem by saying that. Right. They're not going to turn us back. We're in immediately. We're guaranteed in. They caused this. So then they had a problem. How do we get all these people through? How do we process these children that are coming in unaccompanied? That because we said we won't turn you back, as though Mexico is incapable of taking care of children, an oil with a big economy, unable to take care of children. My ass, they're unable to take care of children. They were doing it all during the Trump administration. But anyway, they moved them through. They had to get them to foster parents. They had to get them to relatives, to whoever claimed they would take them. And they screwed the pooch. They never vetted the foster parents. So there was all this fraud going on. And then they never followed up with home visits. Right. They never kept track. They never even had a system in place to keep track of them. They just let them disappear, which put them at risk of hundreds of thousands of children at risk of terrible things happening to them. We don't know the extent of the terrible things that might have happened to them. But, I'm not letting my kids out of my sight ever. I'm going to always try to keep a bead on wherever they are, even when they're adults.
Right.
You can imagine like that huge of a population of children that nobody knows anything about. I'm hoping that a lot of them found their parents here or Uncle Jose or whatever, somebody who will take care of them. But who knows how many of them are on the streets, with pimps. We know that happens or got hooked into labor, forced labor markets and are working in slaughterhouses somewhere, under the lash and God knows what else.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's really sad to think about. And it's willful. I feel like it's not like they're just like, whoops. I mean, it's something intentional. And that's what's kind of so disturbing. And so what are your, I'd love to have you back on my show again sometime in the future, obviously, but what are your, would you like to leave with our audience today, just about everything that's going on, just some of your, last words you'd like to share?
I mean, really, I think the trajectory of this mass migration crisis. And by the way, it is a defined event. It had a very defined beginning and a defined middle and a trajectory of 3.5+ years straight. It's one event, unlike any other event in U.S. history. And I think unlike any event in world history. I'm pretty sure no other country has ever had anything like this happen, even during times of war and even dating back to ancient times. This is really something unusual in human history, what they did here. The trajectory of this thing will depend entirely on the outcome of next week, the election. If we're going to have another 4 years of this, it just is going to cement and expand a fundamental transformation of the United States. We can't have another 10, 15, 20 million illegal immigrants join the 10, 15, 20 that came in under this thing. It's too many, too much, and it's destructive. Change is more than anybody can handle. Trump is going to shut it down and try to ameliorate the worst effects of what happened. And I believe Harris is going to let him roll. This is what they dig this. They love this stuff. This is like the ultimate moral good in their eyes. So I'll just leave it like that.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you joined me today and gave our audience some information that I think we all needed to hear and really hear what was going on, because it's like you kind of have to hear it from somebody who's actually there and on the ground, as opposed to just kind of from the outside of that. So I really appreciate your time, and I look forward to having you back, and God bless you for all that you're doing. And thank you. Just keep sharing with us so we can stay privy to what's happening, and be safe out there. And yeah, thank you again, Todd. So thank you guys for joining us. I hope you enjoyed that. Join me next time where I bring you more truth, love, light, and all of the good things. Thank you, Todd.